The 6 to 7 Figure Show, episode 112. Let's hit it.
Broadcasting from the Valley of the Sun outside Phoenix, Arizona. This is the 6 to 7 Figure Show. Tired of working so hard and having no time? Take your six-figure practice and turn it to a thriving seven-figure enterprise. And now, your host, author, speaker, mentor, and strategist, Frank Bria.
Hey everyone, welcome to the 6 to 7 Figure Show. I'm your host, Frank Bria, and in today's episode, we are going to focus on passive income streams. But first, quick message from our sponsor. This episode of the 6 to 7 Figure Show is brought to you by High Ticket Program. Any service business owner looking to reach seven figures suffers from the same problems. When you start the journey, you're on your own, managing tasks and maybe a few team members. But as a seven-figure business, now you have a team that's executing for you day in and day out. Somewhere along the way, you have to hire, train, and manage these team members, even if you haven't done any of these tasks before yourself. And if you don't manage and scale growth at the same time, you will end up crashing under the weight of new customers or build an expensive operation you can't afford. If you want to avoid these problems and get past seven figures, then let's talk. Let me map out a plan for you for pain-free growth. I want to speak to you personally and tailor that plan for you. So text me at 602-698-7575. Now, that's my personal number. So these messages come directly to me. So if you're serious about finally achieving seven figures in your business, send me a text, 602-698-7575. Now, I am absolutely pleased to be introducing today's guest. Lane Kawaoka is a business owner who is a specialist in creating passive cash flow. He owns over 3,500 rental units and is the leader of the Hui Deal Pipeline Club, which has acquired over $255 million of real estate by syndicating over $25 million of private equity since 2016. Lane uses his engineering degree to reverse engineer the wealth building strategies that the rich use in the top 50 investing podcast, simplepassivecashflow.com. Lane, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Frank.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I want to start off with the engineering background because I geek out on that. We've had a couple of folks with engineering backgrounds on before, and there's something about engineers that just think about things in a really interesting way. So tell us, how do you leverage that technical background in what you're doing with cash flow creation, real estate investing?
Yeah, a lot of real estate investors are engineers, and I think part of that is just we aren't afraid of spreadsheets and numbers. And, we like to play in that Excel all the time. And, a lot of times we'll read all the contracts and everything. So very detail oriented and not afraid of getting our hands dirty with.
There is something about that number piece that's a really critical part because I've gone through that exercise with a lot of business owners, and that a lot of people have that fear of understanding the numbers, but then when they see how it can actually help them make better decisions, they're kind of fascinated by it a little bit. So I want to walk through this a little bit because one of the things that you talk about is understanding the mathematics, really, or the numbers behind making real estate investment work for you. So what are the kinds of things that someone should be looking for, as they're considering leveraging their own cash flow or considering getting into real estate investment in the first place? Is there a place you should kind of wait before you get started? Should you be looking for a certain amount of equity to get started?
Yeah, I mean, when I started was back in 2009. I was a young kid out of college. I saved my money for, you need 20% down payment on a house.
Yeah.
And today you can buy what's called a turnkey rental, $100,000 house out in the Midwest or the South, where it's a nice 3-bedroom, 2-bath. And a family will rent it for $1,000 a month. And, that's kind of getting into the numbers a little bit. $1,000 a month divided by the purchase price, that's 1%. So that's what you're trying to look for from the get-go, that 1% rent to value ratio or higher.
Yeah. So when you talk about rentals, and you mentioned the phrase turnkey rentals, this is something that I think a lot of people get a little bit nervous about when they think about getting into real estate investing, especially when it involves rental properties, is how much work is that really to kind of manage the rentals, the income, and are you collecting rents from people and going knocking on the door when they don't pay their rent? Like, how do you manage that? You got so many units. Clearly, you're outsourcing a lot of this. How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I think when most people think of real estate investing, they think of all the house flippers, but that's not investing. That's doing real estate to me. That's trading.
Yeah.
I work specifically with high net worth accredited investors, and what we do is we are passive investors. We keep things simple. We have money to invest, and I kind of joke around all the time saying, this is real estate investing. You need money. If you don't got 20, 30 grand to buy a $100,000 house, sorry, bro, you can't invest, right? There's a myriad of ways you can do this with no money down. I just don't do any of that, right? Like, I was a high paid engineer, and that's my pedigree, so that's what I stick to.
Yeah, that it makes a lot of sense. Again, a lot of people got burned. I mean, the fact that you started in 2009, when people were having trouble with real estate, obviously you're in this for the long haul. But yeah, the speculative flipping and all that stuff, that does feel to some people like it's something they don't understand. But looking at long-term cash flow of buying and holding a rental that's going to create a long-term stream of income for you seems like a safer bet. And clearly it's a longer term play, and you got to be ready for it. But there is, that's a very different feel, I think, for a lot of people than some of the speculative stuff.
And to your point too, I think for a lot of people, it's what's your highest and best use. Like for a lot of my clients, they're doctors, lawyers, engineers, dentists, and certainly business owners, successful business owners, not the ones that call them entrepreneurs, right? That are just unemployed and don't have jobs.
Right.
But the ones with making some pretty good revenue, right? That's your highest and best use.
Yeah.
Real estate is just a great way to passively make a little bit of side income on the side, and also the tax benefits that go along with that too.
Yeah. So along those lines, one of the things that you talk about in some of the pieces that you have put out, some of your marketing material, is talking about sort of reversing or flipping the traditional pyramid, or the pyramid of traditional investing. Can you talk about what that is and how that works for folks?
Yeah, I mean, most people are taught to usually go after accumulation theory. So what they're going to do is they're going to build a whole bunch of money and live off of it at whatever 4, 6, 8%, right? That's the traditional mindset. And they say in the beginning, when you're young, they bring the guy in from Vanguard or Fidelity. He's just another salesman, right? And he's like, you guys are young. You guys should go into these riskier things because you got more time on your side. And it kind of makes sense. But in my opinion, I think it's the complete opposite. When you're starting off and your net worth is lower, I believe you have to go after more blue chip type of stuff, cash flowing things. And you start to build that up. I mean, the way I started is I just started with one rental property. 2 years later, I bought another. And then I, just waited a year, just watched it like grass grow for a long time.
Yeah.
But you start to build up that momentum. And then once you have enough money, $4, $5, $6, $10,000 passive a month coming from a multiple of rentals, that's when you start to go into some of the more riskier things like development deals and other types of investing.
Yeah.
So I cash flow first, then go hit home runs after.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, which is a lot of the traditional investing advice is for long term. It's for retirement. And so, they say, well, you're in your 20s, so you're not going to use any of this money till you're 60. But when you start to think about investing as creating an income stream or a cash flow, that's a very different goal. And I think you're right. I think a lot of traditional financial planners and investment advisors aren't really thinking about that. They're thinking about this sort of old school, work till you're 65 and then live off the rest of it till you die kind of investment philosophy. And that doesn't seem to be really a working model for a lot of people anymore.
Well, I mean, it's that way for a reason, right? It's an engineered system so that everybody has to work for 40, 50 years and they keep working and they never retire.
Yeah.
Right. Why is it that I can, in a simple like turnkey rental where I have a property manager doing my dirty work, if I buy it right, I can make 20 to 30% on my money every year.
Yeah.
And why is it that when I was in the stock market, mutual funds making 8 to 10%, the delta is 10 or 20%.
Yeah.
where the heck did my money go, right? Well, it went to Wall Street. I mean, that's why they have these big banks, right? Not doing it for free.
Yeah, that is true. That's I always like to say, when you're in Vegas, someone had to pay for that big, huge fountain out front. So someone's paying for that stuff. So you talked about, managing, getting a property manager. Can you walk us through that process a little bit? What are some of the practices that you use to manage those properties remotely?
Right. Like I have a article on my website, 25 questions. I think it's 25 or 26 questions to ask a property manager. It just starts to get you to build rapport with them, see who's legit or not, and see how you interact.
Yeah.
But I'll tell everybody, hey, do it the easy way. Just build relationships with other passive investors that are high net worth, and don't try and recreate the wheel. Referrals, and we're all business owners, right? Referrals are everything, whether you work with a digital marketer or a Facebook ad guy, it's all referrals, right? And especially when you're starting out, you don't know what's legit or not. Yeah. So it's just best to start with building relationships and then taking those relationships and getting referrals off those people.
Nice. Yeah, that's a great advice. Never reinvent the wheel. One of the other things that you talked about that I want to touch on is you've kind of grown now past the point of just it being essentially your assets that you're reinvesting, but you have syndication, you're bringing other investors into this. Talk us through how that's set up and how that works. How are you leveraging essentially other people's money to continue to grow the cash flow?
Yeah, so this is what I learned probably a few years back is, I was getting these turnkey rentals. I got up to 11 of them, and I realized that they're just not scalable. Because, with 10, 11 rentals, you're going to have an eviction or two a year, which is totally fine because the property manager deals with all that garbage. But all for what? $3,000 passive cash flow a month, a few $100s per property. I'm going to need like 30 or 40 of these properties. Yeah. So I went searching, and I started to join different masterminds and started hanging around more my pedigree of high net worth doctors, lawyers, engineers, etc. And they were doing these private placements or syndications. And what the structure of this works is a group comes together, everybody puts in maybe $50,000 or $100,000, and they go buy a huge asset together. And a lot of times that huge asset is a lot better than what one person could have gotten alone, because there's not much competition out there. I mean, who can buy a $10, $20 million asset? Right. So the idea here is we're trying to stay below the institutions, the guys that are investing the average in Joe's money and just trying to place money at a low return. And we're staying above the competition of mom and pop investors, which is this kind of the sweet spot.
Right. So it's really smart. I mean, you're leveraging essentially the best practices of the largest financial institutions of the world, because when they go after these multi-billion-dollar infrastructure projects, a lot of them are coming together as well. You'll see like a Wells Fargo and a JP Morgan Chase kind of coming together and pulling their resources to do that. And basically what you've done is you've taken that model and you've pulled it down to, just to us, the regular old folk who are trying to make that work together, but basically modeling after what some of the smartest and brightest financial minds are doing. So that's great. It's a great idea.
Right. Minus the millions and millions of middlemen when you are working with Wall Street, right? You're working directly with the operator, and the diversification piece, right? You're working with different partners, different joint ventures, different locations, and different types of assets like mobile home parks, self-storage, assisted living, apartments. And, I think it's just the best way to invest, especially when you're, one of my rules is you never go into any one deal with more than 5 or 10% of your net worth. That's just not what affluent, sophisticated investors do. They spread it around.
Right. Yeah. You're talking about risk management, essentially diversification or risk management. Yeah. That's great. Let's pivot a little bit, because you're also helping people. You're working with folks and coaching them through the process of essentially replicating your success. Can you tell us a little bit about that program and who you're working with and how that really comes together?
Yeah, so I started my podcast back in 2016 because all my buddies were asking me, well, how are you buying these properties in Birmingham? And I didn't visit those places. You don't really need to visit the places. They're commodities, right? And just blew people's minds, right? And all my friends asked me how to do it. And I was like, nobody does anything. So I just got tired of it and just started to record it as sort of a journey, like follow my journey. and a journal. So it got really popular, and that's how I got into deals, by bringing my investors along with me. But then, there was a reason why I started that, right? I felt so upset with how the normal Wall Street dogma is out there, just screwing people over, right? Millions of Americans that go to work every day with a crappy like 401k or mutual fund system. And if they would just invest in just one single family home, that would be a huge portion of their retirement. And more importantly, it'd be their kind of pension today. They can live off of it. They can eat cash flow off it. So that's where I started to, work on the education angle. And the reason I call it simple passive cash flow is because it's kind of simple. For hardworking folks with money, all these other strategies go out the window. And I think that barrier to entry is huge for a lot of people. It is so like daunting. But hey, man, like if you're a hard worker and you've got some cash, this is, in my opinion, the best way to do it. Start with some single family homes. Then when you get your net worth up to a certain point, go into private placements and syndications. Rinse, wash, repeat.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So do you have a like a coaching program or a mentorship program that you run?
Yeah, and this is all kind of a new thing to me, right? And I think a lot of the business owners out there who are kind of more in the consulting arena, you create a system, and that system becomes sort of repeatable.
Yeah.
And I think with real estate, it's more not so much the system, but it's the contacts, it's Rolodex,
Right.
and being able to just the network is a powerful thing, to be able, as a collective group, be able to put your heads together and kind of navigate the sea of sharks, because there's a lot of sharks out there. Sure. And shady people. And so I kind of created what I wanted. I didn't want to create a system where it was just real estate for the masses, right? I'm very against those. Like, you shouldn't pay 20, 30, 40 grand for somebody who can teach you stuff that you can YouTube it on your own. Yeah. But what I wanted to, and another thing, I don't like when they take money from people who don't have it, right? People under $250,000 net worth, right? They have to call their credit cards. But I felt like for people who are affluent folks, hardworking, there was a good price that they could pay to get into a safe group, such as mine. Yeah. And so I provide the mentorship in that group, and the Rolodex, and the connections with other like-minded individuals who have about the same net worth and lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, when I imagine sort of following your processes and with your Rolodex and networks, that you're probably speeding that process along for folks where they would otherwise be sort of making these mistakes on their own and kind of figuring it out as they go.
Right. I mean, that's why we pay for coaches, right? That's why we pay for consulting. It compresses time. But I mean, more importantly, it can just mean navigating away from the sharks. I mean, the first private placement passive LP deal I did, I invested with a shyster. Yeah. I didn't invest off of a true referral. It was just some guy mentioned the guy. I didn't know that first guy, and I lost 40 grand. Only work with people like, or trust.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I do know that for a lot of people, that's the fear in real estate, is that, you hear stories of people having been taken and just not making the right decisions, or, being sort of guided in the wrong direction based on where they were from a net worth perspective. I love that you are essentially carving out the net worth of the folks who should be using this approach, because you're already sort of matching the strategy with the folks who would most benefit from it, and the ones who can tolerate the risk versus the ones who probably can't stick it out, because there are some longevity things here. You definitely want to be able to stay in it long enough to recoup the investment and to ride the cash flow for a longer period of time. So I love that you're not misleading people as to where they should be starting there. That's great.
I mean, so you're kind of mentioning, like, for your business owner guys, right? Like, I'm kind of in a unique position where I don't really need to do this education thing for money. I mean, I just like to talk to people. I mean, Thanksgiving is like a horrible time for me because I have to talk with friends and family, and they look at the stuff I do and look at me cross-eyed, and they all like to talk about their jobs, their jobs, and I don't know. I've left that life behind.
Yeah.
And I just like to interact with cool people that kind of are like-minded to me. So it's kind of cool that they pay me to join the group. But I don't like working with people who are big dreamers and haven't saved 100 grand to their name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe they need to grow up a little bit. Maybe they need to control their spending. There's Dave Ramsey, Susan Orman for that. But I want to really help out hardworking professionals and people who have worked their butts off, yet they've kind of used this normal financial dogma and kind of been misled.
Yeah. No, I love it. I think the work you're doing is great. Exciting, obviously really successful with it. You've taken it to that next level. You got syndication going on. That's really exciting. Not a lot of people get to that level. They're still kind of operating independently from that. So that's really great. Elaine, unfortunately, we're out of time. I'd love to continue to talk to you a little bit more, but last question for you before we go. If people want to connect with you, learn a little bit more about your strategies and what you're up to, what's a great place for them to start?
Yeah, they can check out my podcast, Simple Passive Cash Flow, on iTunes, Google Play. And if you guys are interested in interacting with me, my email is lane@simplepassivecashflow.com. I need to know all my folks personally. So I'm a real person in there. And, it's a pay-to-play program for the mastermind. But if you want to come and try out the free version of it, I have got a Facebook group there. You guys can probably just find it on Facebook. Simple Passive Cash Flow Hui is the group.
Great. Excellent. Thanks so much for that. And those links are in the show notes or below the video. So if you're out and about listening, come on back to the show notes page, click on through to connect with Lane. Lane, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate you being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Frank. Aloha.
Aloha to you. Thanks so much for being with us on the 6 to 7 Figure Show. I've been your host, Frank Bria. Just a quick reminder, if you want to talk about getting your business past the 7-figure mark, send me a text, 602-698-7575. We'll come up with a plan together. That's 602-698-7575. That is my personal number. Those messages come to me. All right, everyone. Thanks so much, and we'll see you on the next episode of the 6 to 7 Figure Show.